This is a Jmix exclusive.
But here's the other question. What more do you want? Because, and I'm talking to generally in the audience and some of the people that are talking about Pattons and everything. Look, Kading did an interview with Pattons, and as chopped up and edited as it was, he asked them point blank, did you have anything to do with the death of Tupac Shakur? Did you have anything to do with that? Were you even in Las Vegas? They answered the question, and we hired one of the most renowned experts in the world on deception and fraud investigation in terms of body language and whether or not these guys are lying or not. And she came out and said on the record and put her entire professional reputation at stake and said these cats are lying. So what more do you need? If you have the Pattons, forget the confession letter for a minute. If you have the Pattons saying, no, I had nothing to do with the death of Tupac Shakur, and they're lying, what more do you want? What more do you need than that? I mean, you ask you who killed Tupac. Why don't you ask them who killed Tupac Shakur? Ask the Pattons who killed Tupac Shakur and see what they say. You know, and that's why I keep talking about put them on a lie detector, put them on a polygraph. Let's get these people out there and at least let's get them to say what they have to say for real, and let's find out. We can solve the whole matter very quickly. But, you know, who killed Tupac? We think we know who killed Tupac, and in fact, I think they admitted they did when they lied about not killing him. Flat out.
Hey, Mike, have
Yeah.
you done any research into whether there's paperwork concerning the pull over of Tupac and Suge shortly before the shooting? Was there ever any citations issued?
Well, there were no citations issued, but also you have Chris Carroll, who was the head of the bike cops, who has now come out lying. Of course, he says that Tupac said "fuck you" when he pulled him out of the car and all this stuff. It's this big bunch of bullshit that he puts out there. He was the head of the bike cops, so if bike cops pulled him over, he would know. And it's crazy to me when you listen to his story that he really indicts himself in this thing, because we have Frank Alexander who talks about what happened to Tupac and who did what and who opened the door and all this stuff, and it's in direct conflict with this Chris Carroll, who has now gone around and done the whole media circuit with this bunch of bullshit, and it makes me want to investigate Chris Carroll. Was he involved in Tupac's murder? And is he now involved in covering up Tupac's murder? And
Well,
one thing I can tell you is that when we interviewed Detective Gordon Martins, he told us you can get anything in Vegas. Vegas is for sale.
yeah, I mean, you know, Chris Carroll he used to be a bike cop. Now he was a member of robbery homicide before he left the department. So, you know, clearly he got promoted into a position to be there and move further on the investigation. And so for all of this interest that he has about going around and talking about things, and he's the guy who heard the last words and everything, sure haven't heard him speak much, and nobody's asked him about why he wasn't involved in the investigation if he was that close to it. So you got another character that's full of bullshit.
I smelled a rat as soon as I heard that story. I had a conversation with Frank Alexander where he told me that Tupac's last words were "I can't breathe,"
Right.
as he was being intended to. Um,
By
And
the way,
it's funny. I reached out to Las Vegas police, and they told me that this was their excuse for not investigating Tupac's murder. Yeah,
oh,
not
okay. I thought when you
not
said this
not
was their
much.
excuse.
That was their excuse.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay,
That,
when you said
that
this was
Tupac
their
said
excuse, I
"fuck
was waiting to
you."
hear the excuse, but that was their excuse. I got
That
it.
was their excuse. That
Yep.
Tupac said "fuck you." So, hey, since he said "fuck you" to us, we don't have to
That's right.
investigate his
Fuck his
murder.
civil rights. He said he dared to say "fuck you" to the police, so fuck his civil rights.
And
Um,
one, and one thing we know about Russell Poole, even if somebody said "fuck you" to Russell Poole and they were murdered, Russell Poole would have investigated their murder.
yep, absolutely. Hey, got a comment from Ray Will. Says Pac was the intended victim based on the shots in the car. This it was supposed to be Suge theory is trash. I don't believe that at all. Well, first off, welcome to the show, Ray Will. This is a show where we talk about these things, and we don't hate on people because they have a difference of opinion, and we don't block people because they have a difference of opinion. People are welcome to say what they say. Now, let's talk about that for just 2 seconds. Let's indulge that for a minute. I think Jesse came up with the absolute most solid counter to the whole Tupac was the intended victim based on shots in the car. No, actually, the spare tire was the intended victim. If you look at the shots in the car, the spare tire was the intended victim in that shooting. Okay, because if you look at who was the intended target by who got shot and where those bullets hit, the only reason Tupac died was because a random bullet hit off of his pelvis and ricocheted up into his vital organs and killed him. He was not killed by a direct strike to the head or a direct strike to the heart or anything that would have been a strike for him to have been killed. So, they missed Suge Knight. Well, they damn near missed Tupac as well. Like I said, they had more shots aimed at the spare tire in the trunk of the car than they did at either one of the so-called intended victims. So, I really don't want to hear any kind of comment like that. I mean, it's fine not to believe the theory that Suge Knight was the intended target, but if your whole basis for saying that Tupac was the intended target by the shots of the car, that's far-fetched because Tupac would be alive had it not been for a freak ricochet that tore up through his lungs. So you can't say he was the intended target either.
He
So
didn't
who
even
was?
get a direct chest shot. He wasn't even
Right.
shot directly in the chest.
Well, and remind everybody, I mean, he lived 6 days after that. So, it wasn't like those wounds, they didn't even think those wounds were fatal at the time. And everybody thought that he was improving.
Yeah.
And I go
Yeah.
back to the confession letter. 2 shooters to take out Suge, 1 shooter to take out Tupac. That's a pretty good plan when you have Tupac on the passenger side of the car and you have the shooters rolling up along the passenger side. So you're doubling up on the shooters to take out the guy that's furthest away. But it turned out to be a flawed plan because they wanted shooters they could cut loose if the shooters got caught, and they made a stupid choice, which, I go back to Reggie Wright. If you're Reggie Wright and you're head of security and you put those guys in the one place where they're the most vulnerable, where they got 6 barricades and they can't get out, and that makes you incompetent as a security person. But if you're Reggie Wright, you put them there and you hire these shooters that miss, and they miss, you're even more incompetent. So we have Reggie Wright Jr., who just is incompetent all the way around.
Yeah, I mean, the follow-up question that Ray Will put out said, so why didn't they pull up on Suge's side of the car then? I'm beginning to think that maybe you haven't seen the movies. Maybe you haven't actually watched and seen how this whole incident went down in terms of the situation there. They couldn't pull up next to Suge's car because there were already physical objects in the way. There's a law of physics that says that 2 physical objects can't occupy the same space. Basically, if there are cars already parked there, you can't just pull up alongside of everybody. And that was sort of the genius of the move, was because there was a turn lane that was open, and that's the only reason they were able to get up on the right side of the vehicle, was because there was a right-hand turn lane that was opened up that they could use to turn there. But all of the other lanes, they were stopped at a red light. That you can't pull up on anybody from any side of the vehicle unless you're actually trying to execute a right-hand turn, and it was one of those 6 places there. So I'd really suggest, Ray, and no offense, but please understand your scenario before you kind of ask these questions, because it does actually, show that if you had seen how it's laid out, that you might understand it a little bit better. But there wasn't a chance for anybody to pull up on anybody and get on Suge's side of the car. So then that would have never have been the possibility, and then have somebody get away. Because what are they going to do? Pull up on the light, pull up, shoot the guys, and then wait for the left-hand turn signal?
And I'd also like to, nobody brings up that the windows were down. One of the bullet holes was found in the windshield dash. So we don't know how many bullets actually went through the windows or not. There's not an exact count of how many shots were fired. And no matter what anybody thinks about shrapnel or bullets, Suge Knight was hit with something. That's not a mystery wound on his head. My personal opinion is if that would have been a quarter inch to the left, Suge Knight would be a dead man. And if Suge Knight
Right.
was a dead man, the first person that they would look at would be his wife.
Right, and Adam Barton is right. Well, in a way, because he says, "I just don't see the opportunity to disappear in Vegas traffic." How you doing, Adam? Well, that's kind of why we blow apart Keith Davis' whole testimony, that they just happen to be looking in car windows for Tupac and Suge driving through Las Vegas. Sure, if you're in standstill traffic, there's a lot of windows you can look at, but there's no way you're going to make a U-turn in Vegas traffic. So the idea about not seeing the opportunity to disappear in Vegas traffic, yeah, down Koval in that part of Vegas off the strip, yeah, you can disappear off into oblivion. But especially because that wasn't a real well lit intersection, not like it is today. But that is kind of the point, that traffic is so heavy on a Vegas fight night that the opportunity that Keith Davis says that they just happen to spot him and make a U-turn, that would have been like something in slow motion. I mean, it's almost something like, I keep thinking it's like something in a comedy where they're going to try to make a left-hand turn to make a U-turn in Vegas traffic. 2 hours go by and they haven't moved far enough up into the intersection to actually execute that U-turn, and then when they try to do it, you've got 1,000 other people that have been sitting there for 2 hours going the opposite direction that are stood still, and they're pissed because this Cadillac is trying to execute a left-hand turn and try to cut off all these people at the intersection, and they're all screaming and yelling at him and all that. So it makes it, I mean, the whole theory sounds even more ludicrous when you break it down. But the traffic in Vegas was definitely a factor.
Well, and you think about it, if there were cops that were involved, and the Chris Carroll statement makes me think that, what if those cops were holding up traffic behind to make traffic thin in that intersection? It would sure make it a lot easier to shoot somebody, wouldn't it? And then for that shooter to get away, you hold up traffic long enough so that traffic in front of the shooter is kind of sparse, and then they can make that turn and get away. And so it makes me think that this is bigger. And RJ was once asked what he thought the biggest piece of evidence we have, and he said Michael Moore's got him. And got him tells me there's radios, there's technical proficiency, there's all kinds of other things.